All right, so here we are, the pilot episode of Find Your Free, the podcast. This podcast has been a long time coming. Why are we here? Why are we here? Well, I figured the best way to start this podcast, of course, is by introducing myself, who I am, tell you a little bit about my story, not too much, because the purpose of this podcast over the future, over coming episodes, is to weave in bits and parts of my life story, as I also hope to share a message of inspiration, wisdom, guidance, insight, all of that good stuff. So, but we'll get into a little bit of my story and why this podcast, just to kind of get things started. So, okay, who am I? My name is Rachel, Rachel Voss, and I am originally from New Jersey, a very proud Jersey girl. I grew up right outside of New York City, in a city that I always used to say is the sixth borough, I guess a town in New Jersey no, it's a city. That's how this podcast is going to work. Probably I'll just correct myself throughout, but yeah, no, it was a city, the city of Inglewood, yes. And I always used to say it was the sixth borough outside of New York. But anyway, so I grew up in New Jersey with New York City as my, sort of backyard, if you would, and made the transition to the Washington, D.C. area in 2000. And I came here for two reasons. First, following my heart of a relationship that I was in. And throughout that relationship, I decided to apply to grad school and came here for grad school and to pursue this relationship that I was in at the time. So I've been in the Washington, D.C. area for 20 years. The first 5 years was definitely a battle of comparing D.C. to New York. If you are from the New York City area or, you just know it's like there's no city like New York City. So the first 5 years was a lot of like comparison. And then, around 2005, 2006, it was like, no, DC is its own place. So, so I've been here since 2000. After graduate school, I went into my first career in the housing finance industry, just serendipitously landed into a job that I held for 2 years. And then from there, moved into another company that I ended up being with for the next 10 years, again, in this housing finance industry. Great experience, great opportunity, met a lot of great people, did a lot of work travel, ate at a lot of great steakhouses on the company dime. I don't eat steak anymore, but man, I did enjoy a good steak and martini. So it was a really great career experience, but on the inside, I just wasn't fulfilled. I just felt like something was always missing, and I could never figure out what it was outside of wanting to feel like I was doing something that was of service to others. And even though there were aspects of the company that I worked for, sort of being a company that invested in communities by way of housing finance, I didn't personally feel like I had, my feet on the ground, so to speak, as far as like making an impact, making a difference in communities. And so to try and alleviate that feeling, I applied to all these different jobs and, nonprofits and different places and, had interviews, had, jobs that I thought I was going to get, and, nothing panned out. So here I am again, having a 10 plus year career span at this place, and we get to year 2012. And at this time I am 34 going on 35. And things had shifted at the job by way of management and things like that. And, it just kind of was really getting to the height of my career frustration. And, kind of had this one day where I was like, I'm just going to quit. I'm going to, live off my 401k. But it was like, I'm going to quit and do what? And literally the day after I had this like really frustrating day, and thinking I'm going to quit, and having a coworker who, thankfully at the time talked me off the ledge, like, Rachel, you got a kid. I was a single mom at the time. We'll get into that story somewhere down the line. But, like, you got a kid, you don't really have a plan. You don't want to just jump out there just yet. So I was like, all right, you're right. So literally the day after I had that moment of frustration, I'm rushing to get to work. And, if you live or have lived in the DC area, the traffic here is god awful. And another thing that contributed to my sort of career misery, if you would, it was just like sitting in traffic all the time, to get to this job that you liked but weren't really in love with, so the traffic just definitely made life, a little bit more difficult that way. But yes, I'm like rushing to get to work, and I'm at a red light, just minding my business, listening to music. I think I was like getting ready to apply some like mascara or something, when bam, get hit right from behind, and hit so hard that I ran into the car in front of me, and got into this, this really bad car accident. And next thing I know, ambulance is coming, going to the hospital and all of this, and ultimately ended up being out of work for about 2 months. And those 2 months gave me a lot of time for self-reflection, for insight, for, what am I going to do with my life? And it was interesting because at this time I had, come out of a long-term relationship that I was in that just kind of ended. You combine that with just sort of this misery with the actual, management at the career, tied with a career that like you really like, but again, you're not really in love with. So it was just all these different things that I was feeling. I just, single mom in it at the time. I just felt like it was, sort of this emotional rock bottom. And I always am so thankful to the doctor who wrote me out for those 2 months, because, when all was said and done with the car accident, thankfully I physically walked away. But emotionally, it was definitely a breaking point. And, a couple of days after the accident, I went into the doctor, for like a checkup or whatever. And it's the first time I actually met this particular doctor. And he just kind of took one look at me like, yeah, I'm going to take you out of work for like 2 months. You just look like you need to rest. And best doctor's orders I could have ever gotten at the time. And so during this period, a friend of mine had gifted me 3 yoga classes, and just as a way to kind of, heal and, do something. And so, up until this point, yoga had been in my life by way of my stepmother. Shout out to you, Terry. I love you so much. And it had been in my life, but it was just sort of this thing I did like here and there. It wasn't like a practice. It wasn't like a way of life. It was just, just kind of like, I'll do some yoga. This is cool. I need to like chill out for a second. But it just wasn't like a consistent thing in my life. And so I take these 3 classes, and it was class number 3 where I looked at the yoga teacher who looked nothing like me, but there was just this, so it wasn't that I so much saw myself in her as it is that I saw this sort of like contentment, in her teaching and within herself, at least it just seemed that way to me. And I was just like, I got to get some of that in my life. And so it was at that point where I decided, you know what, I'm going to enroll in a yoga teacher training program. I just want to learn more. It was totally intuitive and instinctual, and something told me, seek that out, look more into that. So I started looking into yoga teacher training programs, and when I saw the price tag, I was just like, okay, I don't know. Is this something that I really want to commit to? Is this something that I want to do? And again, serendipitously, looking back on my life, I had a lot of serendipitous moments, and I bet you, if you look back on your life, you will notice the same. But serendipitously, a woman who I had met previously was in the same Facebook community, the same like sort of woman-based Facebook community I was in. And so when I was kind of like at this place of like, I don't want to pay like the thousands of dollars for a teacher training program, I'm not sure that I want to make that much of an investment, I just want to kind of learn a little bit more. This woman posted that, she was a yoga teacher, she owned a studio, and she offered this level 1 36-hour teacher training program that had a much more affordable price tag for me at the time. And I'm like, boom, I'm going to do that. And I enrolled in that teacher training program and ended up meeting my who I call my guru, my teacher, Dana. I love Dana. Shout out to you. Dana is the owner of Spiritual Essence Yoga in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and Spiritual Essence became my spiritual home. That level 1 yoga teacher training ended up with me enrolling into level 2 with Dana's encouragement. And level 2 was the standard 200-hour yoga teacher training program. And I did all of this not with any intention to teach. It was really just kind of following my heart, just really just going along with this path. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to teach yoga. But Dana is definitely, the teacher who appeared when the student was ready. And, at the end of the teacher training program, she's like, I created a class just for you to teach. And this was in 2013. And I always tell her that moment felt like the Godfather, like she made this offer I couldn't refuse. So it was like, okay, I guess I'm teaching this class. And in September 2013, I taught my first official yoga class. And when I did that, that's when I realized I had found what I was looking for. Teaching yoga became a place where I could connect this desire, this want, this passion to be of service to others with like my love of music and my love of holding space and my love of being personable and sociable. I'm totally an extroverted introvert. We'll get into that down the line. Scorpio with the Leo rising. So, but it was just all of it. The space of teaching yoga encompassed so much that felt authentic to me that, again, I knew I had landed in my purpose. And from 2013 on, I took that one yoga class and taught it with all my heart, all my love, grew that, class, and then ultimately just, started taking other teaching opportunities here and there, and came to a point in 2015, February of 2015, when I realized I am going to leave this career and move into this yoga teaching work full time. And I was coming back from a business trip, and it was just this feeling that was like totally palpable. Like, this is what you're going to do. I was reading a book gifted to me by my yoga teacher called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Highly, highly, highly recommend it, especially if you are a creative, whatever your talent is. It is definitely like a book to help you move beyond your blocks, beyond your fears. And so I was reading that book on the way back from this particular business trip. And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to quit my job. And this time, instead of like 2012, it was like, I'm going to take this yoga thing and I'm going to build it. And that was all I knew. That was all I had. And walked into work 2 days later and submitted my resignation. And stayed on for a little while part-time as I transitioned out. And on May 1st, 2015, Rachel Voss Yoga was born. So that is how I became a yoga teacher. And through teaching yoga through these past 5 years, 2015 to now, it's not so much teaching yoga that is my purpose. It's helping others find their purpose. It's helping others connect, with that deepest place within themselves, so that they know when they have found their purpose, so that they know when they've landed in a space that feels like joy, that feels like authenticity. And yoga is the path that helps me facilitate that. And so throughout the years, even before I quit my job and got into yoga teaching, when I was on social media, I used to use this expression called I'm finding my free, because that's what I felt like I was searching for, like freedom, right? Like just this idea of what freedom felt to me. I wanted to own my schedule. I wanted to feel like I was just in control of my days. I wanted to feel good about what I was getting up and doing every day. And it just felt like all of that was reflected as freedom. And so I would say, finding my free. And the more I began teaching yoga and sort of realizing like, okay, it's not just the yoga, it's something else, I began to connect that it was the movement, my personal movement of finding my free that I was sharing with others. I was encouraging others to find their free. And it clicked one day, find your free. Like, that is the message I want to share. That is the message I'm promoting through my yoga classes, through spaces I hold. Find Your Free. And Find Your Free became the movement, and a message I really began, really promoting in my classes. It became a vision for so many things. And through that visioning, through that idea of like, where can Find Your Free go? I had the idea of like, oh man, Find Your Free, the podcast, right? Because I do love to talk, I do love to share, and I do realize in this very moment, podcasting is much more than just like sitting down, hopping on a mic and talking. Like, it does have to be structured somewhat. So I'm trying to keep myself structured, but it was the idea of podcasting just always appealed to me. And I would always say like, oh, I wish I could just, be a guest on somebody's podcast or, co-host or whatever. But I just love the idea of like sitting down with the mic and just having the space to just, sort of just share, you know what I mean? Just share. I'm definitely one who wears my heart on my sleeve. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. And I sometimes feel like, I'm willing to do that in a take it for the team sort of way, in that sense that I know that more people than not are not comfortable with being vulnerable, right? And when you're not comfortable with being vulnerable, when vulnerable is not something that feels safe to you or whatever it may be, a lot of folks can sometimes feel like they're alone in what they're dealing with. And so if somebody's out there with a voice of like, hey, I'm going through shit, there's probably going to be cursing on this podcast down the line, just letting you know. But I'm going through shit. You're not alone. This is what I'm dealing with. Like, when you realize that there are other people out there dealing with your stuff, it just helps you feel less alone. And I just see my yoga classes, I see this podcast, I see other spaces that I hold as just places where people can just feel safe, feel safe to be vulnerable, feel safe to just, you know what I mean? Just feel safe, and feel seen, when I used to have satellite radio in my car. I gave that up a long time ago, but when I used to have satellite radio in my car, I used to love listening to the Oprah Network. And there was always this little sort of advertisement or, just sort of mindful space she would take like in between the different shows that were being broadcast. And, she would always return to her saying, I just want a space where people feel seen and heard. I've learned through all the interviews that I've conducted over the years that people just want to feel seen and heard. And that always resonated with me. And so that's what I seek to do with the spaces that I hold and with the work that I do. I want people to feel seen and heard. And all of that is, under the umbrella or tied into the message of Find Your Free, What does freedom mean to you? Like, what does it really mean to you? Is it financial freedom? Is it, freedom to live out your passion? Is it freedom to live out your creativity? Is it, walking away from a marriage? Is it moving into a marriage? Like, what does freedom mean to you? And, this podcast is just going to be a place to encourage you on your journey to freedom. And, that's why we're here. That's why this podcast. Yeah. There's like so much I want to say, but like, I'm trying not to say too much. So just, looking at my notes here, but yeah, so this podcast will just be a journey, again, where I will share, parts of my life and intertwine that with messaging, of encouragement, of empowerment, when I really had to get clear on like who the audience is that I'm serving, right? So a lot of creatives will definitely relate. Like, we just get out there and we just like put our work out there and we want it to be loved and received. And then it gets to the point where you have to like think about the business of things, right? Like, what's your branding? What's your vision? What's your message? You know what I mean? Like, what's your target audience? And, when I first started teaching yoga, it was like, oh, I just want to teach yoga to everybody. And I was like teaching at a gym at a time. And I had, 30, 40 people come in the class, and it'd be men and it'd be women. So it was just like, I just want to teach yoga to everybody. And then last year started working with like, a brand development consultant and just trying to get clear on like, okay, I'm stuck at this place, like with my business, like, why am I not getting past this place? And then that's when I learned, like, oh yeah, you got to get clear on like who your, target audience is, like who you're connecting with, all that type of stuff. And so when I whittled it all down, and really looked at it, I realized, yeah, it's women. And I realized that the age range is really, really wide. So it's like, I say 25 to 64. I have some younger than 25. I have some folks older than 64 who come, to my classes, but it's really this range of 25 to 64. And some brand folks even then would say like that audience is too big, but 25 to 64, and I'm sticking with it. But it's an interesting spectrum, right? Because I'm 43 now. And so it's like, I feel like for the women who are, say, like that 25 to maybe like 32, maybe 35 range, it's like, I'm big sister Rachel, right? And then for the women who are older than me, it's just sort of like, okay, she's been through something. I respect what she has to say. And I'm at a place in my life where I'm still learning. So I will listen, to what she has to say. And I'm not in my 60s and, I guess, quote unquote, an elder yet. But there is something that I can contribute, to the lives of women who are older than me, because I have had some, life experience and some life experience I'm willing to share. So my audience is women, and I am okay with that. Again, I share yoga with everybody. I want everybody to find their peace. I'm always pushing like my boo, my man to, take yoga with me and all of that. But my story, my experience is that of a woman. And so when it comes to the real sort of inside out empowerment work, my experience primarily, is that of a woman. And so that's who my target audience is. And so my hope is that, women who listen to this, and, maybe some fellas too, but the women who listen to this will just get a gem each week. Again, find some inspiration, find encouragement, just find something that helps them, put one foot in front of the other, that helps them to think about their life in a much bigger way. And again, to maybe just stop and think, what does freedom mean to me? As women, we're mothers, we're sisters, we're daughters, we're friends, we're caretakers. We are a very, very, very special breed. And, it's easy to get so caught up in the giving of ourselves and the capacity that we have, to give with love and with emotion and stuff. And it's so easy to kind of get away from taking care of number one, which is ourselves. And so, again, this podcast is just kind of like a place for you to come and take care of yourself, just find something that is maybe nurturing or nourishing, to your mind, to your soul. So throughout this podcast, we will get into stories about my very short-lived marriage, my first very short-lived marriage, divorce, becoming a single mom, finding myself through all of that, finding myself, through, leaving a career, taking a leap of faith, just thinking about my life, so much life. I grew up in church. I converted to Islam. I was a practicing Muslim for a while. Like, there's so much that we can get into, that we will get into, throughout this podcast. So that's why I'm here, and we will be here on Tuesdays because my first yoga class that I used to teach, that one that Dana created for me, I used to teach that class on Tuesday nights. And there was a student, shout out to you, Tamara, who used to, after we had class together, she would, share Facebook posts about how class was like relaxing, encouraging, whatever it was that she got from the class. And she would always end it with the hashtag Tuesdays with Rachel. And that always, always, always resonated with me. And so I always knew when I was ready to do this podcast that it would be on Tuesdays, because I always wanted to honor, like where it began, Tuesdays with Rachel. So we will be meeting on Tuesdays, and we'll get into some messaging. We'll get into some story sharing. I have visions of, over time, like inviting people on for interviews and insight and all that good stuff. And then we'll always end with a closing breath and a passage from just all different books that I love to read from, when I teach Shavasana, which is the final resting posture at the end of yoga classes. I always like to read a message, just something while students are in this state of like absolute reception to, kind of get a word in that can maybe or maybe not, but hopefully that will just really deeply resonate and be something like a little nugget that they can hold on to, once they move on from class. So we'll always end with sharing some words from a passage and a closing breath. And yeah, that's going to be the flow. So I think with that, I'm going to pin any more of the why. I think I got everything covered. So again, I just want to let you know who I am, why this podcast, and the story of Find Your Free, which I think we have covered. So just going to take a deep breath in here. Exhaling out through the mouth. And the passage that I want to close with today is from a book that I share in a lot of my classes. It is definitely a fan favorite, but it's a book called Journey to the Heart from Melody Beattie, and it's daily meditations on the path to freeing your soul. And so this passage that I'm going to share today is called Trust Each Moment. Trust, trust, trust. Again and again, that's the issue. See how much of your pain, your anguish, your tension arises simply from not trusting the absolute perfection of the present moment. I've lost my way. I'm off track. I'm somehow wrong, in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. Where I'm going is a dead end. Oh dear. You are not off track. You haven't lost your way. You're going somewhere worth going. Somewhere magnificent beyond the ability of your mind to comprehend. By trusting the perfection of each moment, you give yourself a gift, permission to enjoy the journey. Don't just take the trip, let yourself enjoy the ride. So, lovelies, as I like to call my yoga students, trust, it's just, as the passage says, it's an important part of the journey to trust the moment, to trust that you are where you're meant to be at the present moment. Trusting my heart has certainly led me to this space of being in front of a microphone, launching my first podcast. And it ends with enjoying the ride. And so beginning this podcasting journey, I hope that you will continue on with me. This first episode might feel a little bumpy, a little bit like, where is she going? A little bit all over the place. But, as I learn and as I grow, I hope that you will just enjoy the ride with me, as we grow in this space together, as we grow together in finding our free, finding your free. And yeah. So trust. So with that, we'll go ahead and end this first episode of Find Your Free, the podcast. Again, my name is Rachel, excited to be your host, excited to hold this space. And I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. And I'll end with something that I say at the end of all of my classes. May you be happy. May you be free. May you be peaceful, easeful, useful, and joyful. The light in me honors the light in you. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next week.